It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Harry Turtledove. Hey, Harry, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks for coming on the show. Nice to have you here. So, let's see, a lot of stuff here. I'm looking at your bio. You are a writer, an author, best known for alternate history, historical fiction, fantasy, science fiction, fantasy, and mystery fiction. What is the difference between alternate history and historical fiction?
Well, historical fiction reflects things as they really happened. Alternate history imagines a change somewhere in the past and then looking at the world, what the world might have looked like after the change happened. So that it's looking at a world that doesn't actually exist. But one of the nice things about One of the nice things about it is that by looking at worlds that don't actually exist, you can look at the real world in a funhouse mirror that you can't get any other way.
Okay. So in a historical fiction, the history would stay correct, but different characters that probably didn't exist would be living in that particular moment of time. Is that correct?
That's one way to do it. You can also write historical fiction with the populated almost exclusively by real people, but that's harder with alternate history because things change.
So if you were to write, as an example, if you were to write a story about Franklin Roosevelt and he could walk, would that be alternate history or historical fiction?
That would be alternate history because it changes the world. It changes Franklin Roosevelt. What kind of man would he be if he had never been paralyzed? That's the interesting question. That's alternate history.
Okay. Then how would you make that into historical fiction? So he's still in a wheelchair.
I'd leave him in a wheelchair. Exactly.
Okay. See, I'm just trying to figure this one out. I think I get it now. Okay. Very good. I also see on here that you've got a whole bunch of different names. Do you write in different names with the different genres? Is that how that works?
I mostly write as Turtledove. I've been other people for various reasons. I was Turtletaub, which was what the family name was before my grandfather anglicized it for a while for historical fiction in the 90s for 90s marketing reasons. I was Eric Iverson early in my career because the first publisher I sold a fantasy novel to said, "No one will believe Turtledove. We'll give you this tough Scandinavian-sounding name." Okay. They also said, "We won't buy it if you don't accept this." So I accepted it. I added a middle initial, Eric G. Iverson, for some of my other, some of my fiction after that. The G stood for goddamn,
Good choice. Yeah. And then I see Dan Chernenko on here. That's a good name.
I'm sorry?
I said I see Dan Chernenko as one of your alternate names.
Yes. I was writing a lot in the early 21st century, and I wanted to try another name that wasn't mine, and if it took off, I'd use it for a while. It didn't take off, so I was stuck there with 3 books by Dan Chernenko.
Also says here that you have completed your PhD in Byzantine history. Now that's
you want fries with that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if that was a great degree to get a job.
Well,
did that help you find a good job?
Well, what happened was I read a book called Lest Darkness Fall when I was about 14 years old, and it dropped a modern archaeologist back into 6th century Italy. And I got fascinated by how much the author was making up and how much was real, and I soon discovered that he was making up relatively little, and most of it was real. And that finding that book in that secondhand bookstore 60 years ago basically is alternate history on the micro-historical level. If I hadn't found that book, I almost certainly wouldn't have the degree in Byzantine history because I never would have heard of it. I also wouldn't have written most of the things I've written. I would have written something because I already had the bug, but it wouldn't be what I've written. I wouldn't be married to the lady that I'm married to because I met her when I was teaching at UCLA when the fellow under whom I studied had a guest gig in Greece. I wouldn't have the kids I have. I wouldn't be living where I'm living. I wouldn't be talking with you about my new book that'll be out next month. Other than things like that, it didn't change my life at all.
Well, sometimes it happens like that. I mean, sometimes you do something and it's all the things that peripherally happen as a result of you being there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, I had to think about it. Byzantine history. So that was going way back in my brain. That was sort of after the Romans, before the Ottoman. Is that where that fell?
That's exactly the space. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. All right. Interesting enough. Yeah, because now with this whole war going on in Israel, I did start to look at the history from basically the Ottoman Empire on to see what was, try to enlighten myself somewhat as to the history.
It's been a mess for a long time.
It has been. It really has. Yeah. And I don't want to go there, but just to put it into perspective with your Byzantine history. So, okay. So now you have a new book out, and your book is called Wages of Sin, Terrifying Tale About HIV Spreading in the Early 16th Century. All right. When I first read that, and then I looked at your bio, and it says born 1949. So you're 13 years older than I am. You were certainly around during the beginnings of HIV in this country in the early 80s, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, indeed. One of the fellows I went to graduate school with died in 1986 at the age of 41. Yes, I would. Yes.
Okay. I've lost a couple of friends myself. I was in my early 20s at the point that happened. And I'm just looking at this now. Why would this be something that you would want to write about in a historical fiction capacity? Because it seems
this is alternate history. I mean, this is
alternate
history.
Looking. Okay, all right.
Yeah, this is looking at the real world through a perspective you can't get another way. How would the world change if the only way you could be sure that you wouldn't get HIV would be not to screw until you were married and not to screw anybody but your spouse after you were married? This is wonderful in theory, but how do theory and human nature collide? And that's what I'm writing about.
Okay. All right. Because it seemed to me the point I was trying to make was that we went through that in the 80s, where if you got it, it was a death sentence. Until 1995, they didn't have effective treatment for it.
Oh, yes.
So it just... okay, all right. Well, I don't want to give away the book because we want people to... So I don't want you to, tell us the big exploding sort of giveaway scene. But how does it parallel with what happened in the 80s, or does it?
Well, the thing is that here it's not a disease of gay people. It's a disease of everybody, as it was in sub-Saharan Africa and still is to some degree, because absent modern hygiene, modern medicine, it's just about as easy for a woman to catch it as it is for a man and to spread it. And that puts it from a disease of a minority that in the 1980s was despised to a disease where everybody is at risk. And that means society is going to have to react a lot more strongly than we did.
Is there a moral tone to it at all?
Not.
No? Okay. Well, because when you said, people should...
There's a tone of furious resentment from the female half of the population at basically being put in purdah is what there is.
Okay. All right. Because, the idea of people shouldn't have sex till they're married and then only have sex with their partner. I mean, there is a moral... that is the method of making sure you don't come down with it. But that method, as I said, runs dead against human nature, and that's the problem. Well, that's true. Although trying to explain that
people like to mess around.
Yeah,
it's fun.
It is, and I think the '60s sort of made it okay. I think the sexual revolution,
the '60s, and contraception, and modern medicine, and penicillin, and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
You could have fun without the consequences that people had been worrying about since the beginning of time.
That's true. Also, when I was reading that, I thought of what was going on in South America at that time, that measles and smallpox brought by the Spanish were wiping out indigenous South American peoples who had no immunity.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. It's reasonably probable that syphilis entered the New World, entered the Old World at just about that time from the New World. So, and that would also help spread HIV, by the lesions it causes.
You've done some other ones that I see here that look interesting about if Hitler had won and if the South had won in the Civil War, the American Civil War.
Yes.
I suppose I could ask you, since those books are already out. I mean, we do want to promote your books and have people buy them, but
that would be good. I approve of that.
Yeah. So what did happen if Hitler had won? What would Europe look like now?
The book that I think you're talking about is called "In the Presence of Mine Enemies," and it's set in the early 21st century in a world where the Germans and the Japanese divide the world between them. And it's set primarily in Berlin, and the people involved in it are the last surviving, or they think they're the last surviving Jews in the Reich, and they're trying to stay alive. That's the story.
Oh, okay. All right, interesting. Has anybody ever done one about what if the Kennedys had survived?
I don't know if anybody's done one about both of them. The place to look for that is there is a wonderful website called uchronia.net, UCHRONIA.net, that lists just about every alternate history story ever written, and you can search it by subject, and you can search it by date of departure from the real world, and you can search it by author. You'll find a good many stories of mine there too. But I don't know the answer to that, so I'm just going to have to decline.
Okay. Well, I always thought that would make an interesting story, that if JFK had lived, and presumably he would have won re-election in '64, it meant he would have been president.
Seems a reasonable bet.
Yeah, then he would have been president to '68, and then if Bobby ran and Bobby beat Nixon, so Nixon loses to another Kennedy again, that would have been the end of Nixon's career as a politician, presumably. And Bobby could have been president till '76. We would have avoided Nixon altogether. It might make, an interesting story. I didn't know if anybody had done that.
I do not know the answer to that either, so I can't tell you.
So this book, Wages of Sin, you said it's not out yet. It's going to be released when?
It's coming. The release date is December 12th.
December 12th. Okay. So just in time for Christmas. It'll be coming out.
Absolutely just in time for Christmas. Some of them were spotted at a bookstore in Canada, and the nice lady who spotted them bought one, so I'm very happy with her.
Have any of your books been...
I don't know how that happened.
Have any of your books been made into film?
No, I've had several optioned and none produced. These things happen. Option money is also nice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and then you get to option it again. if they don't produce it in a certain amount of time. I've had a few people who have been on here who have done that. In fact, one woman I had on here got $800,000 for her book.
For optioning? I'm very impressed.
Yeah, and they never made it. It was Paramount, and right after they gave her check, and the check cleared, Paramount had a big shakeup, and all the CEOs and the big mucky mucks all got fired, and a whole new crew came in, and her book went right on the shelf.
We don't want this stuff. Yes.
She was the luckiest woman on the planet, as far as I was concerned. You know, so she got $800,000 in the rights,
all the way to the bank.
Rights to her book back. Yeah. Absolutely. The reason I asked you about film is because I don't know if you saw the one Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
No, I haven't, unfortunately.
It's sort of a rewrite of the Manson family murders that happened in...
Oh, okay.
Okay. And in the end, Manson family member gets incinerated by a flamethrower in the swimming pool of Sharon Tate's neighbor. And it was so funny. I mean, it was gross, but it was so funny just because of the way that it happened. In this version of it, they go to the wrong house. Instead of going to Sharon Tate's house, they go to the neighbor's house.
Oh, my God.
Okay. And you might want to check it out. It's a pretty good film, and it's a very all-star cast that's in it.
Okay.
And it has a happy ending, you know? So it's pretty good. But I think on that, Harry, we're going to have to wind this down. Thanks so much for coming on. Again, the book is called Wages of Sin. My guest is Harry Turtledove. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
If you need to hang around with me, come see. I annoy people on the application formerly known as Twitter. My handle there is @HN Turtledove. I will see you there, and there is a reasonable chance you will not like my politics, but I don't care.
Well, saying that for Twitter, it could be anything. Your politics could be from one extreme to the other. I don't know what's on there now.
Nobody knows what's on there now, and it's just as well, too.
It doesn't do much of a service for our show. We're thinking of canceling it, but I've had that account for so long that I just hate to hit delete, because once you hit delete, you'll never get it back.
Yep.
So I don't know. But anyways, well, listen, it was great talking to you. Thank you for coming on the show. I hope this book does well.
Thanks for having me.
And
thank you.
You planning on anything else? You got anything in the works?
Oh, yeah. I have a collection coming out next year called Other People's Playgrounds, and I just sold a fantasy novel, sort of a noir fantasy novel set in post-war Los Angeles called Twice as Dead. I don't have a publication date for that yet.
Okay. Well, maybe when you get that one done, you can come back and tell us about that.
That would be good.
All right.
That would be good.
Okay, Harry, it was nice meeting you. Nice chatting with you. Best of luck.
Thank you very much.